Hola Vincenzo.
Ciao Lali, come stai?
I'm doing well. I'm very excited as
Mm.
always. How are you?
Oh, well, I know that this next guest is someone that you're yet another guest that we have that you're very excited to talk to. So I
It's
just want the
interesting
I
how
want the people to get going on this one.
it's interesting, like all my these people that I've grown up with my entire life, where they're
Mm.
suddenly becoming guests on our podcast, and it's an absolute dream come true. And this particular gentleman, an Englishman, is our first Formula One driver, former Formula One driver, former IndyCar driver, Le Mans winner. He's a CEO.
Yeah.
He owns a race car team. Tell them who he is.
Mark Blundell. The crowd goes wild. Yeah, I mean his career, the career trajectory I think is really interesting because now as someone who owns an agency in motorsport, picking talent, managing talent, representing talent, like you said, he has a team now as well in British touring cars. I think there's so much of his career that goes into this moment, and there's just so many fascinating aspects about the CEO thing to me because we did talk to a few other folks where what you learn as a driver, we talked to Tony Kanaan, like what you
We had
learn as a
James Hinchcliffe,
driver,
remember? James Hinchcliffe.
both of them, but Tony specifically said something that got me like thinking all of the stuff that he learned translates into being a team principal, even though he didn't really want to admit it because he's like, oh no, you have to have it in you. And I'm like, yeah, but you
Yeah.
have it in you because you're a racer, right? And Hinchcliffe said something similar.
Hinchcliffe said that you finish a racing career as a
Mm,
really well-rounded person because there's so many
totally.
aspects involved. And I think Mark Blundell is sort of the representation of that, how you can be a
Yeah.
really well-rounded person after a career in motorsport.
Yeah, and he raced during, for those that don't know, like he raced during a time that many consider like one of the greatest eras in Formula One IndyCar. So it's pretty cool. This conversation's incredible. Enjoy it. I know we will, and you will. So, Mark Blundell.
Hello, Mark Blundell. Welcome to the Business of Speed podcast. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Pleasure to be with you guys.
We're excited to have you.
We were talking before this, first Formula One driver on the show. So we're excited because we both grew up during the time that you were racing on the track. So it's a little bit of a throwback for us.
You guys don't look that old, but anyway, that
Oh, thank you.
Children. We were wee children. So we said in the intro, Mark, your career spans Formula One, IndyCar. You won Le Mans. You turned now into a CEO. You have a racing team. And so we're really happy now to talk to you, sort of the man behind the helmet. And I want to start a little bit with your childhood because I think it's quite interesting. You didn't grow up in this sort of silver spoon family, and you were a motocross rider for a very long time until you were 17. So tell us about how a kid who's a motocross kid goes from two wheels to four. And were your parents really helping you along? How was that journey?
so my family has no background whatsoever in motorsport. My grandfather on one side was on the railways. My grandfather on the other side was a coalman. My dad actually had a link to cars because his career was a panel beater and sprayer. So he would like remodel cars. And my mum had no understanding of cars and motor racing anyway, so that was that. Um, but we started from pretty humble beginnings. So yeah, in fact, our first home was a static caravan, like what we would call a mobile home. So and I never had a cot. I had actually a chest of drawers, and that was where I slept in the bottom drawer. And through hard work and tenacity and determination, my dad grew because he was a very entrepreneurial guy and grew into a situation where he started to build. And we moved on to what we call in the UK a council estate, so basically a supported home
Mm.
from the government, and where we could actually have our first house as such. So but his drive was something that's rubbed off of me, and his drive got us to a point where I was able to be at school in a rural community, but at the same point, the hot sport then was motocross.
Mm.
So I'm not the guy that did the education program. I don't advocate that by any means. I don't I'm not proud of it, but I just never felt school was for me. So very much a Monday and a Friday were like my bike days. Friday was prep day, Monday was strip the bike down day. And I did motocross at schoolboy level for a few years. And that kind of gave me that competitive edge.
Then
What
yeah, go ahead.
what was the moment you said to yourself, "Okay, I think this might actually be able to be a future. It's not a hobby. This is something I can do." Was there a moment for you that you remember?
So actually, like school for me was tough because in latter life now I found out that I'm dyslexic. So I
Right.
kind of always knew there was something wrong with me. I didn't know what the technical term was, but that was kind of a little bit difficult for me at education time. Um, the understanding of whether I was going to be any good at doing something took a while to settle in and get some confidence built around it. But definitely motocross gave me a foundation to understand that speed and competitive sort of sport was something that I thrived on. I didn't step into car racing until I was 17. And the basis of that was I was very fortunate that my dad had done well at this stage and basically has said to me, look, I will give you some funding to go away and you go and try and see if you can do this stuff called motor racing for a season. And by the way, at the end of the year, you're going to have to get a real job because like this is just pipe dream stuff. So, that was really where it started. The great thing for me was I was quite reasonable at it. The bad thing for him was that, yes, I was actually quite reasonable at it. And all of a sudden, the cost element was starting to be a bigger problem. But I didn't really understand motor racing could be a profession. I kind of looked at it
Mm.
as a little bit of a sport, but not really as something as a business and a profession. So I didn't really get to grips of understanding that there was going to be an international career ahead of me until maybe 1986, 1987. And that was kind of like Formula Ford time, 2000, F3000. Then there started to be some sort of inkling that, hey, there's guys out there in Formula One teams and manufacturers that are taking interest.
So yeah,
So
I was gonna say you're an F3000. You had a really good F3000. And I think, do you think a lot of that success was because you were so mechanically minded? You knew so much about the car. You'd built and stripped engines, you'd done all this stuff. Did that translate really well into chatting with your engineers and to improving the car? Do you think that helped you advance further up that ladder quicker perhaps than some of your peers?
I think it helped me in a way that because I wasn't that academic, I was very much like century wise, what was going on with the car, whether I was actually taking it apart or putting it back together or motorbike at that stage was helpful in then me explaining what was going on when it came to actually relaying back to an engineer. Um, the writing element wasn't my strong point, so those maps, track maps back then, probably weren't very good in terms of spelling names and that kind of thing. But I think the helpfulness for me was, yes, there was some elements of actually having an understanding that gave me a bit more insight. And you have to understand, I was 17, 1984, Formula 4 1600. By 1989, I was testing a Formula One car for Williams. So back then was quite a fast transition. Yeah. I mean, now we'd look at it and go, oh, like, you're 21-year old. But, now it's changed. But so, yes, you're right. It was very helpful. And I think that was some of the strengths that I had because I'd done a lot of development work over my early stages of career. And, that was something that I built in terms of relaying information back and giving an understanding that the engineers could actually get on top of and work from and develop the cars.
From your perspective, as someone who has driven and climbed the ladder and been across multiple motorsports, you said how it's not really possible now to jump that quickly. Why do you think it was just so different in that day?
I mean, I think maybe there was like a little bit more opportunity back then and there was a bit more bandwidth for me. Bear in mind, Formula One was much bigger than what it is today.
Mm,
Crikey, when I got to F1 in 1991 as a Grand Prix driver, we would pre-qualify to qualify.
yeah.
You know,
Ooh.
8 guys would go home on Friday morning. Yeah. So I think probably there was a bit more opportunity there. And I think from that stage, like doing it quick and still being quite young was a little bit out of the norm. In this day and age, actually being very young and being in Formula One is kind of standard. Right.
Mm.
So, but I think, back then I mean, there was a lot more hustle. I think, you had to really like, and I've always said this, and being in the driver management business, I've always said this to our drivers, like, you can drive. That's the easy part. This is easy for us. That's what you do. It's being the CEO, being the motivator, being the politician, being the CFO. That's all that goes on in the cockpit of a race car. And then you have to remember to take it out. And that's going to help you build your career for the next stage.
I love that. So let's get into F1. How did that break come to be? How did you land the seat in Brabham? Martin Brundle was famously your teammate. Then how did that come together for you?
They came off the back of testing for Williams. And basically, when I was out there doing the test work, and I'd probably done, for example, more mileage than any other driver in an active ride suspension car. I did most of the development side. And so I was on track a lot. So in that, I was in the shop window. People could see what I was up to in a Williams Grand Prix car, and they started to take note. Even though I had a long-term contract with Williams, and looking back on it in hindsight, I should never have left Williams because it was a bad decision. But as a youngster and not having anybody around me at the time to actually sort of give me some direction, I chose to be a Grand Prix driver with the Brabham Formula One team. And at that point was ecstatic that I was in Formula One, but actually it was probably one of the worst decisions that I made career-wise because it served very little purpose. Other than I understood Grand Prix at the end of the season, I had scored a world championship point, and I'd kind of done enough to actually get picked up by McLaren to go and do more test and reserve driver role, which was better for me at that point because I think on 2 occasions at Brabham, I was actually in the factory waiting for my paycheck to get cleared. Yeah, I mean, it's funny now, yeah, but actually,
No, it's not funny then when you're waiting.
no, it doesn't happen. Can you imagine saying to people today, after watching Drive to Survive, that, oh, the guy might not get paid this month because his check bounced?
Ugh.
Yeah, that was the reality even back then. We're not talking that long ago, and it was on 2 occasions that I didn't get paid, and I had to drive to the factory, sit in front of the financial guy, and say, "Look, I'm not leaving the factory till I get paid," because I was a young guy, and also I already had a family. I was a father already before I got my international career underway. So I had responsibilities and I had a mortgage. So yeah, it's kind of like the glam was great. The reality was different.
I mean, you look at what the teams spend now, it's mind blowing compared to at that point. So you're on the grid with quite a few of the heavyweights of the time. I would love to hear some of your impressions of a few of the quickly, but Senna, Prost, Mansell, Berger. How was it to be around those guys?
Listen, for me, it was fantastic. When I started racing in '84, a guy called Martin Brundle started Formula One in 1984.
Yeah.
And we have similar names. We come from the same part of the countryside in the UK. And for me to get to a stage where I was his teammate was huge. I'd already raced against Martin in sports cars in the World Sports Car Championship. So that was fun. But, I was lucky. I was around in an era when we had some fantastic drivers and some great names. And fortunate that I stood on the podium 3 times. With all the podiums was world champions or world champions to be. The odd one out was only me, but at least I could sit my grandkids on my knee and show them a photograph. But it was super times. F1 was, as it always is and has been, like the pinnacle of motorsport, and it was a privilege and a thrill to be inside. But it was cutthroat. It was, you hear this term Piranha Club. F1 is definitely that, and the more and more you become involved in it, the more you understand that, sometimes you need not just carbon fiber in the monocoque of a race car, you need like a carbon fiber body vest, because there's a lot of stuff coming at you.
Yeah.
You were there sort of at a really political era of the sport, as you say. Is there any stories that you could maybe share with us today that would actually shock us, that you're like, this would never happen in today's Formula One?
I don't know on that side, honestly, and I'm not really one to like go back and reflect on stuff, but I'm always looking forward. But I pretty much feel that maybe if I had an I or an O on the end of my name, it would have been helpful for me. If I was called Blundelli, I probably would have been able to get some more sponsorship. And
let's trade names, Mark.
And I actually, thinking back, there is also there is also an element of that, which I think sometimes gets missed, is that, and I take my hat off to Lando Norris with what he's done this year. Being a British driver in a British Grand Prix team, it is added pressure. I don't care what anyone says, it is added pressure. The fact that the factory and the compilation of the people there is predominantly UK, there's a little bit of added pressure. And, sometimes it was interesting when I went to Ligier as a roast beef, as we were called then, as a British driver. And I was inside a French organization and I was speaking English. It's almost like they had to listen to me and they had to take note. When you're in a UK team and you're a Brit, sometimes things just don't get carried as much as that, that flamboyant, eloquent Italian or Brazilian or something like that. And it does get overlooked. So, hats off to Lando.
Yeah. So now you leave F1. What was the impetus to head over to the States and start racing? For purposes of this interview, I'll call it IndyCar, but it was karts at the time. Yeah. So what was the impetus to head over?
I would probably say a little bit of disillusionment with F1, because what had actually happened is I'd stepped in and taken on board the McLaren role. I got to the end of the season where we'd done a pretty solid job, and I was actually due to go to Sauber in 1996. I got to a heads of agreement with the Sauber team, and during this kind of interim period, this gentleman called Mateschitz took an investment in the team, and some of the criteria behind that investment was that he felt that the other driver in the other seat that was available should be a Grand Prix winning driver. And the only guy that was available that didn't have a drive and had won a Grand Prix at that point was Johnny Herbert. So Johnny basically then got drafted in. I got told, sorry, but that's the end of the road. And I got a little bit disillusioned and said, you know what, screw this. I've got a deal from Mercedes. They're going to support me with an engine that I can take to IndyCar, an engine program. And I'm going to go stateside and go and drive around in circles.
There you go. So
there's another MB connection for you. Mark Blundell, Mercedes-Benz.
Opa.
The MB in your life is very interesting. Anyway, I had to notice that. Go ahead, Lally.
I just want to talk a little bit because I actually personally adore this race, 1997 Portland. Let's talk about that for a moment. Really, really one of my favorite kart races of all time.
There is DeFerrin onto the front straightaway. Does Blundell have time to run him down?
I think he can close the gap, but he's got to be able to get by him. He's got to be able to make that pass.
Keep in mind, they've got this very broad front straightaway that Blundell can use if he has to. Fittipaldi using that left foot braking he's not familiar with, lights up the front tires. Blundell is right there with DeFerrin. 2 weeks ago in Detroit, Blundell missed out on his opportunity for his first career victory when he ran out of fuel with one corner to go in the race. And now he has another chance here in Portland. Looking left and right around DeFerrin. It's a much narrower racetrack because he is on those slick tires.
Not only that, it's a narrower racetrack because look at Gilles DeFerrin knows it's the last lap. He is not going to give him any ground. And it'll be interesting at the end of this straightaway to see what lines Gilles DeFerrin takes. Does he go down the inside and protect his position? Yes, he does.
Blundell looks down the inside. 3 more corners to go, and then he'll have that wide and dry front straightaway. It'll be a drag race on the drag strip here in Portland. Off the corner they come.
Oh, it's going to be a photo finish.
Blundell, here comes Mansell in third. To the line they come. And Mark Blundell takes the victory in his 22nd career start. The Englishman into the win column in PBG kart competition, getting Gilles DeFerrin on the straightaway. Team owner Bruce McCaw and the team can celebrate after being denied in Detroit. Another look. DeFerrin up top, Blundell in the middle, Boiselle on the bottom. And look at the speed differential as Blundell powers past to the flag right there. The margin of victory, 0.027 seconds, 27 one-thousandths of a second. Raoul Boiselle third, 55 one-thousandths of a second. The top 3 cars covered by less than 6 one-hundredths of a second. What a finish.
Did you know you won? Give us that last lap. What's going on?
So actually, that whole race was about timing and understanding of your levels of confidence. So just to go on the basis of what you're saying is like that was a wet to dry race. So when you're starting a race in those conditions, the sweet spot of actually who's got the, big enough levels of confidence to come in, put slicks on in damp conditions and hang on to the car and get the job done. And that's really basically my decision-making process behind calling to say, I'm coming in, guys. I want slicks and I'm going to go for it. And some tried it earlier than me. If you watch that race and you'll see they spat off the circuit, and we managed to get it and keep on the track and also generate enough heat that we started to really take, some chunks of time out of the guys in front. And you're quite right. It got down to the very last corner of the last lap where I just about had enough traction with these hot slick tires compared to Gilles, who was on wets, and powered off the turn and went by him at the start finish line. And I think I won it. It was the smallest margin ever to win a race on a road circuit, like 0.03 or something
No
crazy. Like,
less.
Oh,
is
even
it?
less. Yeah.
Not 27.
There you go. So you have the stats. So I guess it's like this much or something crazy. So somewhere in my office is a picture of that actual win. Someone painted it. It was fantastic. But I never knew that I won the race until I'd actually gone around a few corners because of all the excitement, everybody had thrown up the headphones in the air, and like I'm sitting in this car going around and thinking like, well, there's no one really said anything, right? So, there was so much excitement in pit lane, and then I came around, and you'll know at Portland there's like this big scoring pillar, in the track,
Yeah.
and there I could see like there was like car 18 at the top, and I'm like, you know what? I think we did it. And it was kind of cool. And then eventually somebody came in the radio and said, well done, you just won your first IndyCar race. So yeah, kind of
And
cool.
just to remind people, 2 weeks before, you had a little bit of a sadness because at Detroit, what happened at Detroit? 2 weeks before.
Detroit was actually looking like it was going to be my first win. And unfortunately, we ran out of fuel on the last corner of the last lap. So, everything got justified and rectified with the next race. Yeah, pretty cool times.
Amazing.
You've built such a career off of the track now as well. When did you know, or when did you realize, all right, it's time for me to stop racing. I want to advance my career. I want to do something else. Like, did you just lose the desire at one point, or was it a conscious thought?
So I think firstly, probably I should say that, in the background, I've always had something commercial going on because I've always considered the sport to be fickle. Who knows what's going to happen tomorrow? Who knows whether you cross the road, break your leg, or you go into turn one and also something drastic happens. Off the back of also having a very entrepreneurial father and work ethic, and also having a young family, I always made sure that there was something to fall back into if sport didn't really generate revenue. So commercially, I've always been in tune, and I've always had a love of doing deals and having a commercial outlook. When it got to a point of understanding the motorsport side was starting to drip away, and some of that was also driven off the back of me getting the opportunity to do television, because I did TV with the ITV F1 channel in the UK for like 7.5 years. So I had to make a bit of a conscious call on it then. And I felt like, you know what, I've had a good innings. TV's still cool. I'm still around the sport I love. And it was still a lot of fun. Nowhere near as much fun as driving a car, but it was still fun. But then coming away from that, I then felt like, and actually with my former business partner and teammate, Mark Blundell, that we could maybe contribute something back into the sport with looking after young drivers. And that's really what we put together. And that's a business now that have been the core of that running for sort of just up to 20 plus years now.
Sure.
So it's moved on a huge amount more. We do a lot more than just look after racing drivers. But yeah, I have like a real job now. It's kind of.
Well, I think it was always a real job. It was real and enviable to most of us. Something the way I hear you talk about your driving days is actually quite fascinating. The actual tone in your voice is so calm and matter of fact and grateful as well, which I think all bring you to where you are now. You have to have those aspects when you're leading a company, right? In 2019, when you tried to go back behind the cockpit in British Touring, it was a little bit tough, but it also, if I remember correctly, it launched MB Motorsport. Is that correct? So was there a lesson in that? You know, how did you take a moment where, all right, it didn't go very well. I tried to get back behind a wheel. It didn't go well, but it launched something. Like, what does that look like for, you know, those of us that might fail at something? How do we learn a lesson and take that forward?
So I think from my side, first and foremost, I've never wanted to burn bridges. I've always been on the basis that I can walk back in through doors that I've been involved in, you know. So that revolving door may have spat me out the other end, but I can go back in again and say hi to everyone, and that's something I've always maintained. At the same point, I think I've always looked at like where are we with opportunity with what we're doing. You know, okay, maybe it's not quite going according to plan, but is there something more that we can extract from this? So you're right. 2019, I went back into the British Touring Car Championship, which is a championship I love and always watched. I actually went back in because we had a commercial partner, Hewlett Packard. So HP, a big blue ribbon brand, and they wanted to support me. And I tried to convince them several times. There's much younger, fitter, better looking racing drivers than me that we actually manage, and they could do a great job. But they wouldn't have it, and they wanted me to come out of retirement, basically. Fundamentally, it was a poor decision in many ways because it was a headache. It's the worst season of my motorsport career ever. It was very tough. I didn't enjoy it as much as I should. I couldn't get to grips with a front-wheel drive racing car. It does not suit my style of driving, and I'm too old and too long in the tooth to change. And I have my style is quite, you know, I'll hit the throttle pedal. It's very attuned to Senna. In fact, if you looked at my map and Senna's, we were the same, and which was very good for the pair of us when we were at McLaren. I was doing the testing work for him because I hit the throttle 3 or 4 times in one corner. And in front-wheel drive, that just doesn't work. Yeah. No. So out of what we did that season, I looked at the British Touring Car Championship and said, this has got huge potential. And I think I can bring some partners together and we can build something. And I said, for sure, I'm not getting back in a race car at that level again. So let's do something where we can build a platform and bring some commercial partners together and build something which to date has been successful. We've won the championship. We've brought, I think, another level of professionalism to the pit lane, not to dumb down on anybody, but I think we've just applied ourselves in a way that we think is just a little bit better and a bit more conducive to doing business. And ultimately, that's what it's all about. You know, the byproduct is going around on Sunday afternoon in circles, but the business element is what gets us there in the first place.
Yeah.
So you convince a retail giant, Theo Pavitis, to come in as an investor. How does that happen? And did it take a lot of convincing to say, hey, come invest in a motorsport agency, come a lane that perhaps wasn't so familiar to him?
Well, I don't think the investment side was really it. It was actually like the investment was made by us and we put the framework in place. And I said, look, this is now a platform for us as partners. And I think we can deliver this for you. And to give you an idea, like our motorsport program in the British Touring Car Championship has had 500 school children through it this year doing a STEM program, you know, and that's something that we're really proud of. And that's something that we don't see in many areas of the sport. So again, we're delivering value, and some of that value, just because you don't see a brand on the side of the car, it may not be that they're not getting value in other ways, because that's definitely a focal point for us. So again, the business side is leading the way, and, you know, the going around the circles is the fun bit. But as I said, without the check getting written, without it getting banked, no one's doing any motor racing.
Yeah. One of the things that Lally and I talk about with some of our clients is about going beyond the sticker slap, and which you just mentioned, right? And you have your partner program, and you really introduce a lot of sponsors to one another to do B2B deals. I think I can figure out how you realize this, but how did you don't, that's not normal for a lot of folks to think, let me start plugging and playing these players, these sponsors with one another. What made you realize there was opportunity there?
I'm really interested to see what you think.
So my mind works. I have worked with quite a few very large global brands, and I work with sponsorship teams a lot. And so I always listen to conversations and realize, well, someone might need, what another company is providing, right? And so my brain just works in relationships, I think very similar to you. So that's where I was going with that, was that you see how these pieces and the puzzle fits together. And when you provide that value, that's, like you said, it goes beyond the sticker on a car, because it's something Lally and I talk about, and we've put it out there, is that car is going by 200 miles an hour. If you have a small little logo on a car and your CEO thinks that's the pinnacle of value, then there's something wrong, right? You've sold them the wrong thing. And being able to sell added value above and beyond that ego stroke, which is what I believe the sticker is how you, the agency, provide not only value to your clients, but to the ecosystem as a whole. And then, of course, they're going to want to keep working with you because you've done more than just brokered a deal, which is what a lot of folks do. They just want to broker a deal, like a real estate agent. I broker the deal, I get my cut, I'm out. Well, that doesn't work. And that, again, listening to you talk about your career and how grateful you are and not burning bridges, I'm starting to piece everything together and say, okay, Mark truly cares about relationship, as opposed to, okay, I made my paycheck and I'm good. No, because how do you keep that coming back? And a lot of people focus on the initial paycheck. Okay, I got the paycheck, but can you get that recurring? Can that paycheck keep coming back to you? Is there a way to keep that sponsor coming back to you? I mean, look at you. You got HP, and I believe Intel as well was involved in your British touring car. So they kept coming back, and that's a recurring revenue stream. And so as a business person, I think that's valuable to you. Anyway, so that's where I was going with it.
And you've answered the question beautifully. So listen, for me, you know what? We're in the delivery business. We're only as good as what we deliver. And that's what you get counted on. And that's where you build relationships, because if you keep delivering, then the relationship gets stronger and stronger and stronger. So you're quite right. My whole network program that is inside our business was actually started some 11 years ago. And it was off the back of actually managing professional racing drivers. Because I would go to a private bank or a lawyer or an accountant, and go, hey, I have my professional driver. They now need a qualified, trusted advisor. Can I put you together? And this is all off the back of a phone book that's been built over many, many years. And then I'm looking at this and going, actually, you know what? I should monetize this and frame it up, because I think there's something much bigger here. And it's grown into something now where we have some 40 corporate clients that are partners. 6 of those are $1 billion plus businesses, and we do B2B within that partnership. And then some of those partners come alongside with our motorsport program. Some of them come back into it, and we bounce away, all over the place, from some things that are quite bizarre, totally removed from motor racing, from whether we're just delivering our telecoms partner into a big corporate, and they just connected 800 handsets so that the workforce is now on their mobile tariff. Nothing to do with trackside. But that's what makes the business go round. Yeah. And that's just having the foresight of, for me, is like, I'm a dot joiner. I'm looking at all the dots. I'm just joining them up.
Yeah.
I find
nothing smart, guys. Just
very smart, Mark.
Well, but you say it's not smart. And many times the obvious way to act as just a human being is often the smartest way. People don't, it's like, oh, there has to be something more challenging. It has to be more difficult than this. It really doesn't. And so I love how simple, even just the way you convey that, it's like, I'm just connecting dots.
I'm gonna pivot us a little bit, because you've been in motorsport for so long, so you've seen it change, you've seen it evolve, and now you see electrification, you see a lot of digital engagement, gamification, right? So as a businessman and former driver, what do you think are the biggest commercial opportunities right now and that are going to be coming in the next 5 years in the world of motorsport?
I think the brand awareness side is almost going full circle, because I think, like what you just relayed, is like, that sticker slap is almost coming to a point where it's come back around again but maybe it's not on the side of a car, it's just by association. Right. And that association then goes into licensing, merch. it's just amplified and it's growing. When you get somebody like LVMH do a 10-year, a multi-year agreement for hundreds of millions of dollars, and you look at all the brands that sit underneath that umbrella, there has to be something quite serious. Of course, Formula One is like soaking up everything at the moment. I hope that it actually like cascades down.
Yeah.
And that's the one worry that I have, that maybe sometimes it gets some land grabs. And also, I do also worry that sometimes it might get saturated because it's not every couple of weeks like it used to be. It is like almost on your door every day that you see Grand Prix racing. So
Yeah.
I do worry, but I think there's, the digital side is growing exponentially. AI is coming in now, and I'm trying to understand where we monetize that in our motorsport world. I'm probably going to have to speak to people much, much smarter than me to try and understand that. But I think where we're now seeing is, especially after pandemic, relationships, value added, ROI, yes, but ROI in a way where it's like, what can we do together to actually make sure that, we're growing together? And I don't know about where you guys are, but where we are at the moment economically, we're quite stifled and we don't have a great outlook. And it's even more imperative that we go back to dig deep and get our relationships and our foundation of those in play, because we know it's going to be a choppy ride. So this makes sure we work together and we trust each other. And then we might not make so much money, but maybe we'll still make some money and we'll carry on until things get better.
Well, with the money you do have, you were able to expand into a 2-car team for next year in the British Touring Championship, which we've touched on a few times. Tell us a little bit about the Laser Tools Racing with MB Motorsport, the plans for the team, how involved you are in actually running the team. We want to hear a little bit about that.
So we do things a little bit different. So we don't actually own the team. We have an operating team, and then we underwrite basically the sales of that operation. So we take on the risk. So that's worked for us. And we've gone with the Speedworks team with 2 Toyotas for next year. Ambition wise, yes, we want it to be 2 cars, just because we've got more real estate to sell. At the same point, if one car goes out in turn one, we had nobody else to back us up. And also from a points perspective, sometimes we lost out the last few years of not having another team player that could be used in a strategic way. So there's been a lot of pluses. The downside is we've just had a budget in this country, and we've just had some real negative sort of impact on us. So we're trying to find funding to run our 2 cars in an economic climate that isn't healthy. But, everyone loves a challenge, so we're up for that. So let's not worry about it too much. We'll push on. But the enjoyment will be having 2 cars out there with the MB Motorsports and Laser Tools Racing brand attached to it. And hopefully I will put my flag in the ground and say, target an independent champions win. Always have to have something to look forward to. So let's state it today on your show.
There
Is
you
that
go.
is that why you brought Flash on?
You know what? I've looked and I've looked at the car. You're right. You're very wise, Vincenzo. You're doing a great job, right? So I looked at the championship. I looked at where front wheel drive is, and it seems to be more dominant in the championship than ever. I've looked at the Toyotas, and I felt that they are the next generation of car and potential with development to improve. And I looked at the way the championship's going with a Saturday race that now comes into the play compared to where just 3 races on a Sunday. And for me, experience will count. And when you have a multiple champion like Gordon Shedden, and you have Aaron Taylor-Smith, who's also won races, I think that's going to play dividends when it comes to results across next season. And I could well be wrong, but in my own mind and in my heart, I hope I'm going to be right. And fingers crossed, you're right. Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed for you. Yeah.
I just want to ask, are you going, are you going to be like an Andretti Global? Are we going into other series, Mark? What does the future hold?
The future holds that we probably, with the agency, the business, that we will go outside the UK, and we've started to do that over the course of this year, and with some activation work with brands and alignment in that way. In terms of motor racing, probably not. I think we'll stay domestic, we'll stay in touch. And also, just to be clear from my perspective, I don't want to be the biggest. I want to just be quality, small, nimble, and I want to deliver. And if I can deliver to the best of our abilities as a business, as an individual, I put my head on my pillow and I go to sleep and I get a good night's sleep. And that's all I'm asking for, And if that makes us some money at the end of the year and my shareholders are happy, Merry Christmas.
Last few questions here, but I want to try and you kind of just answered it, but across your career, motorsports, business, what is the best piece of advice you could give Lolly and myself, who are budding motorsports agency owners? What would you give? What advice would you give us?
Listen, I think at the end of it, it's like everything. It's like never look at something and don't try and shut it down immediately. Go and look at something and really understand it before you have a viewpoint. And at that point, if you do come back with like, no, this is not for us, don't be scared to say no. I think that's sometimes where people get so sucked in that they say yes to everything. And I've heard all this stuff, oh, like say yes and worry about it afterwards. You know what, guys, that's not really a good way to go about things. You know, that's like me saying, oh, I'm going to commit to the corner at 150. And if it goes wrong, I'll mop it up afterwards. The only thing I'm going to mop up is the damage bill and, you know, hitting the wall. So, you know, that I would just say, like, don't be scared to say no. And also have confidence in yourself, because when you walk into a room, if you don't deliver that, nobody else is going to buy in. So, you know, if you haven't bought into yourself when you get up in the morning, then, you know, have a look in the mirror and just be humble. The world's a great place, you know, and we're really fortunate to be a part of it. But there's a lot to offer, and then there's always enough on the table for everybody to have a piece of pie. So you don't need to be greedy. Just go and enjoy what you do and deliver. And if you deliver, business will be there for you.
Yeah, I love that. If you
Yeah.
deliver, people want to work with you, and they want to create a lasting relationship with you, right? So that's so important.
Humility is lacking in motorsport, that's for sure.
Yes. Yes. We always end our interviews with two questions. I have my signature question that I adore asking drivers whenever I have the opportunity. So I need you to put aside wins, trophies, championships. It doesn't matter what series they were in or their employment status. Who is the most naturally gifted driver you ever raced against?
Emma? One word answer. I don't think you even need to enlarge upon that. Naturally gifted, Senna.
Perfection.
Well, then the final question is from me. What was your absolute favorite racetrack to race on in the entire world? Doesn't matter what series, just what's your absolute favorite track?
Would be Spa-Francorchamps, which is probably in the top 3 circuits for every Grand Prix driver that you talk to.
Yeah.
And I can't take that away. So, yeah, Spa's like, it's a pretty special place.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mark Blundell. It was a pleasure. We could talk to you for another hour. So
I
hopefully
really
you'll come
could,
back
yeah.
for part 2 in the new year. We love having you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you very much.